Hello, BookTube. This is Wednesday, and that's Epic Comic Book Wednesday when Michael K. Vaughan at Stately Vaughan Manor combines forces with your humble servant at Hyde Cottage to talk about Marvel's Epic collections. These are really nice, full-color, trade paperback reprint volumes that Marvel's been doing for years now that hops all around their massive backlog. These aren't the same thing as the Marvel Masterwork series that come out in hardcover. That are just plowing through reprints in chronological order. Instead, the Epic collections can bounce all around to different eras on different titles. And that can be a bit uneven, right? And that unevenness is shown really clearly in Michael's choice of Epic collection this week. I'm letting him pick the Epic collection since he has 10 times as many of them as I do. That's the sort of two sides of the seesaw here. He has 10 times as many Epic collections, graphic novels, omnibus editions at Stately Vaughan Manor as I have here at Hyde Cottage. That's on the one side, and on the other side, I have read all of these issues. There's plenty of them that he hasn't got to yet, but I have read everything that Marvel has ever done, and I have read most of it many, many, many times. And today's Epic collection is this. It's a volume called Lonely Are the Hunted. It's the X-Men. That is a John Buscema cover. For some reason, really poorly designed. But then again, I've mentioned on this channel many times before in my own comic book digressions that although John Buscema is a fantastic artist, he's not a good cover artist. He doesn't do good covers. I can count on the fingers. He's done thousands of them. I can count on the fingers of one hand the numbers that were in it, the ones that were any good. Most of them are muddles. This is a muddle. But nevertheless, this Epic collection collects, I think, issues 24 to 45 of the X-Men. And it's not the beginning of the X-Men story, where a man named Charles Xavier, who unbeknownst to the general public, is also a mutant. He's in, we gather from the comics, early middle age. He's bald, he's confined to a wheelchair, he has super telepathic abilities, and he comes, as his own origin story tells us, he comes from a great deal of money. And he sets up an institute in Westchester, New York, called the School for Gifted Youngsters, that it masquerades as a posh private school, but is really a training ground for teenage mutants. Professor X has developed a machine called Cerebro that allows him to find those mutants, and then he offers to bring them to the school, teach them how to control and refine the use of their powers, and also inculcate them in what later would become known as Xavier's dream, which is that mutants and humans can get along, can peacefully coexist. And this Epic collection is not that origin story. That origin story we don't ever actually see in the early years of the X-Men in the 1960s. Stan Lee brings us into the world of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters after it's already been up and running. We don't see Xavier recruit any of the original X-Men. The Angel, a beautiful and wealthy teenage boy who has big white wings growing out of the backs of his shoulders. The Beast, who is basically a big gorilla-type figure. He's got as much manual dexterity in his toes as he does in his fingers. Extreme athletic ability, sort of the strong guy of the team. We have Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, who has telekinetic abilities, but also starts to learn telepathy from Professor X. That's a little bit of a gray area when it comes to the X-Men. How do they contact Professor X if they're not telepaths? That sort of thing. Jean Grey develops telepathy in addition to her ability to move objects with her mind. Then there's Bobby Drake, the youngest X-Men, who is Iceman, who develops the ability to not only coat his own body with ice, but also to create ice constructs. Freeze people in blocks of ice, create ice sleds and ice ramps, ice walls, that sort of thing. And also Scott Summers, the leader of the X-Men underneath the direction of Professor X, who is a teenager whose eyes are constantly emitting beams of concussive force. that he can't control. Whenever his eyes are open, those beams are coming out. Professor X and Scott Summers develop ruby quartz glasses, a visor over his eyes that contains that energy. But if Scott Summers opens the visor, then the beams come blasting out. That quintet was the original X-Men. And they have a whole bunch of adventures as somewhat bumbling teenagers. And this Epic Collection is not that. This Epic Collection is later. A couple of years later, when the X-Men sales were doing really poorly, when Stan Lee was paying it almost no attention at all. He had shifted the plotting and the writing chores to Roy Thomas, who's extremely talented, but who obviously doesn't seem to care about the X-Men, at least in the chunk of issues that we're reading today. In other words, this is not a good Epic Collection. And Michael K. Vaughan knows that perfectly well. He mentions it. I'll leave a link to his video down below. He mentions it a couple of times in his own video, and he also sent me a message saying, I know you don't drink coffee, but maybe for these issues you should reconsider. And if he thinks that now, imagine how I felt when I was buying these things on the newsstand, hoping that they would be good. I kind of liked the original issues of the X-Men. I liked a couple of things about them. One is that it's an extremely underpowered team that is never used effectively, which was kind of frustrating. In the 21st century, it would be the equivalent of hate buying. It's the X-Men never fight effectively, even though a part of their explicit training at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters is presumably to learn how to fight effectively. They never do. The X-Men in these years virtually never face an opponent together. They might all be in the same room, but they each take one separate shot at the villain, whoever it is, without ever seeming to want to work in unison. It's always baffled me. So that was one of the reasons why I bought those original issues. Another one was that Stan Lee sometimes came up with really good villains. The X-Men, the first 10 or 11 issues of the X-Men is a great run of villains. You've got Magneto, of course. The Master of Magnetism appears in the first issue, but you also have the Vanisher, an evil teleporter. You have Eunice the Untouchable, a man who has an impregnable force field that emanates from his body. You have the Blob, big mountainous guy who cannot be hurt or moved. You have Mastermind, who can create lifelike illusions. A whole bunch of really good villains that crop up virtually one after another in that early run. And that sort of kept me coming back. And boy, oh boy, is that magic gone by the time we get to these issues. Oh my, is that gone. These issues have a run of villains. There's virtually a new villain introduced in virtually every issue of this run. And they're almost all terrible. And the one who isn't, the one who has even the slightest bit of personality, isn't really a villain. Banshee, who some of you will know, if you know the later X-Men, Michael K. Vaughan reminded me of my extreme age by mentioning that he only started reading the X-Men when they were revamped by Chris Claremont. And Banshee was one of those characters. Claremont looked at the past of the X-Men and at other mutants elsewhere in Marvel continuity in order to form that team. He didn't just make a core of new characters. He also reached into the Hulk and grabbed Wolverine. He reached into Iron Man and grabbed Sunfire. And he reached back into X-Men history to grab Banshee. And he's introduced in one of these issues. And it turns out that he was being largely mind-controlled by somebody else. But even the issue is ridiculous. Even though it introduces a character who will go on to have a huge life in Marvel Comics, the issue itself is still ridiculous. Michael, in his video, praises Werner Roth, who does a lot of the artwork for these issues. And I guess that's warranted. It's workmanlike stuff. Michael himself admits that. It's not good artwork. It's just not bad. And the X-Men have, in their many, many incarnations, had plenty of bad artwork. Elsewhere in these issues, you also get pencils by Don Heck, and also a couple of issues by Ross Andrew. And there you have some. Oh no, that's not Ross Andrew. Oh no, not in the slightest. No. Or yes, it is. It's just very poorly inked. Let's see if we can find. Yeah, there we go. That looks a little bit like Ross Andrew. All artists have little signatures. And with Ross Andrew, the hands and feet are a giveaway. Also, this perspective He loves doing that kind of perspective where either the front of the character is right up at the camera, or the back of the character, the bottom of the character is. These preliminary issues give you no idea whatsoever of what Ross Andru can really do. None at all. See, there you go again. There's that angle again where you've got the boot right in your face. That is a classic signal of Ross Andru's artwork. With artists, you can always tell. Gil Kane has the downward hand. He does it in every issue that he draws. John Romita Sr., the great John Romita Sr., you can tell him by his thumb. A character's thumb will be outstretched in an identical way, decade after decade. So if you're wondering if maybe the inker is throwing you off, you can always tell John Romita Sr. by the thumbs. But look at the villain. Utterly ridiculous. And they go on and on. They go on and on throughout the issues here. They're just really, really bad villains. Who else have we got here? Cobalt Man. Look familiar, does he? I wonder if I have an example of a phenomenon that Michael mentioned himself. Yes, I do. As sales started to slip, you might think that in good business sense, when sales start to slip on a title, Stan Lee would hunker down and figure out a way to fix that. Because that's the Stan Lee personality that's conveyed in Stan's soapbox. That's the Stan Lee personality that was conveyed in any kind of writing or speaking that he did. But that didn't actually happen. Stan Lee was a huckster. He was a hustler. And if he had a regular book, one of the 8 that he was writing in a given month, where the sales started to slip, he lost interest in it. It isn't that he buckled down on it. He lost interest in it. And so it got rebranded a few times. I want to show you an example of this. The X-Men featuring Beast and Iceman. And there's the villain I don't even need. Do I even need to say it? Does that look like Dr. Doom? You have the X-Men featuring Beast and Iceman. Here's another one featuring Cyclops and Marvel Girl. But there's another villain. Look at that's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This run on the X-Men is, in other words, bad. It's a bad run. It's got mostly bad artwork. And mostly bad writing. Roy Thomas can do a lot better than this. And since these issues are really bad, and this Epic collection is $40, that's not chump change. If you're a fanatic, and you've got limitless space, like Michael K. Vaughan is both a fanatic and also, thanks to the many, many side rooms and galleries and dungeons of Vaughan Manor, he has plenty of room, then you might get this. But otherwise, I realize Michael is in a project to read every X-Men comic, but that is going to involve doldrums, and this whole volume is a doldrum. And that brings us to a phenomenon in comics that I've mentioned before. The idea of a run is a thing that I've mentioned before. It comes up in comics. Comics fans will know what it is. And I don't really have any idea, no clear read anyway, of how many people are watching this particular video who aren't comic book fans. But one way or another, in comics, you have a run on an issue. And that isn't just how many issues such and such a writer or such and such an artist did in consecutive order. A run is more colloquially known for a good run, for something noteworthy. And that involves the writer and artist being in sync somehow, feeding off each other somehow, even if it's disliked. It involves that. It cannot be done this way. With Roy Thomas running to Stan Lee with plot breakdowns, Stan Lee obviously not caring, and not being willing to let any of his first-rate talent go to the book. So not only is Roy Thomas not in sync with any artist because the artist is changing all the time, or because it's a drastic fish out of water like Werner Roth, who is not made to draw superhero comics and isn't going to share in Roy Thomas's enthusiasm. Roy Thomas is an enthusiastic fan of comic writing, an enthusiastic comic writer. And if he gets an artist that is willing to meet him with enthusiasm, magic happens. Absolutely magic happens. If not, then not. And there's nothing you can do to save a book that nobody cares about when it's like this. There's just nothing that can be done. And so I don't think that Michael hates you. I don't think that he hates you. In the fact that he's making this our epic choice for Epic Wednesday doesn't mean that he hates you. It just happened to be the next thing that caught his eye. But you absolutely should not read these issues. It's not necessary in any way. There's virtually no lore here. These issues cover a period where the X-Men graduate from Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters and go to college. Jean Grey goes to college. So the X-Men are aging. They're not kids anymore in these volumes. And also, a couple of times, rather intriguingly in these issues, we get fairly direct mentions of the fact that the X-Men's powers are increasing. Not all of them. Angel, for instance, never really gets a power upgrade in this incarnation. Although a friend of mine always said, I don't know if you can make it out, a friend of mine always said, the sure sign that the X-Men had entered a poison period is when the Angel's costumes started involving suspenders. I'm rather a fan of the character of the Angel. No need to elaborate, but nevertheless, I can't help but agree with that. But this is what happens when you have a comic in a doldrum. And unfortunately, I mean, those early issues of the first issues of the X-Men were good. They were Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. They couldn't really be bad, but they weren't inspired. They weren't a great run. And the original run of the X-Men, and the reason I say that is because the X-Men is as split as BC and AD. And we'll be getting to that. Those of you who don't know your X-Men history, we'll be getting to that. The X-Men were reinvented by Chris Claremont, and you've never seen a more clear before and after in a comic title imaginable. This is the before period. This is the original X-Men. And the original X-Men did have a run, what comics fans would call a great run. It was Roy Thomas, but the artwork was Neil Adams, and it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant artwork, and it went on for a few issues that aren't included here. They have a volume of their own, and we'll be getting to that volume. I'm sure that we will. I'm sure that it has an epic collection. I'm sure I might even have that epic collection. But that was the only real good run on the original X-Men, where the writer, not Stan Lee, and the artist, not Werner Roth, were in sync with each other, wanted to do something more than ordinary. Runs can be magical when they happen, and they usually happen as a combination of the writer's enthusiasm and the artist's enthusiasm. Every once in a great while, that won't be true. Every once in a great while, it will be a one-man show. Frank Miller's Daredevil run, for instance. Walt Simonson's Thor run, for instance, were a one-man show. They were running everything, and it worked, and it was magic. But usually not. Usually you need that counterbalance. You need people challenging each other, supporting each other, cheering each other on. And that Neil Adams run on the original X-Men is the only run that the original X-Men had. And then, as you could see, you could tell from those issues that this was a failing title. If you're rebranding the title and the logo, and it's not at the behest of fans, it's just because you don't give a crap anymore, and neither does anybody else, then you know that you're failing. And I want to show you an example of what happened soon after that. Let me see if I can quickly get to that. Soon after that, the title went to reprints, which is The Kiss of Death. Let me see if I can show you an example of that. Yeah, here we go. Here you get Gil Kane artwork for the covers, but nevertheless, this is a reprint of the issue where the Mimic re-enters the fold. The original cover did not look like that, and the original issue did not cost 20 cents, a mind-numbing 20 cents. Here you have a Gil Kane cover of the issue where the Banshee is introduced. That is not what the Werner Roth cover for the original thing was, and here it's Gil Kane again. Another classic Gil Kane symbol. There is the downward facing hand. Another Gil Kane signature thing for his artwork, just in case you're interested, is that you'll almost always be looking up someone's nose. Gil Kane does that all the time, but he doesn't draw the issue. This is a reprint. You get an original Gil Kane cover, and that goes on. Let me see. There's another example here. Yes, the Subhuman. That is not what the original cover looked like for that issue. And that's when, I mean, you've got the bigger, bolder logo, and the higher price tag, now 25 cents. But the comic was on life support, because if you're a reprint title, then no one's interested in you. And that's what happened. Here we have X-Men 93, which I'm sure the Epic Collection will get to if it hasn't already. In fact, no, I think this is in Lonely Are the Hunted. I'm pretty sure that this is, or maybe not. No, this isn't. This might not be in there. Or is it? It's Werner Roth artwork. So maybe this is a reprint. Yeah, this is certainly a reprint, because that's a John Buscema cover. So, okay, so this is a reprint of an earlier issue, and that earlier issue is in Lonely Are the Hunted. Here we have X-Men, the X-Men Cyclops fighting Quicksilver, who in the issues that we're reading for Lonely Are the Hunted, Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch are mutants. You will know this because you know the movies, and they are members of the Avengers. And at one point in the issues that are in Lonely Are the Hunted, Professor Xavier realizes that the team is demoralized. Jean is away at college. Scott Summers, Cyclops, has lost his leadership edge. The Angel is wounded. They're down in manpower, in other words. And he telepathically contacts Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch to ask if maybe they want to be X-Men. That's the second time in the run of the X-Men where Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch are requested by the X-Men to join the team. Never actually happens. They turn the team down in both cases. The first time, Quicksilver says, we're tired of taking orders from anybody, we're on our own. And the second time, they're X-Men, and Quicksilver says, sorry, we're Avengers. We don't want to join another team. But this issue also features a very abortive fight between Cyclops and Quicksilver that would simply not happen. I mean, I know it's the X-Men's own title, but it has been established in Marvel continuity by this point that Quicksilver might not be as fast as the Flash. He's nowhere near as fast as the Flash, but he can run faster than people can see. When he's at full strength, and he is in this issue, this is a reprint, I'm remembering this now. When he's at full strength, he can run faster than someone can see, which means Cyclops' power is entirely about what he can see. And he doesn't see any better than a normal person. It's just when he sees, he blows things apart. So Quicksilver would be able to punch him at Mach 1 20 times in the span of the time it's taken me to describe that maneuver. Cyclops is not invulnerable. He's a normal teenage man. Quicksilver would easily win, is what I'm saying. It wouldn't be a fight. It would be over in an instant. Unless Cyclops could see him. If Cyclops could see him, then Cyclops could blast him. But you can't see Quicksilver at full speed. But anyway, this is X-Men 93, and this is a reprint of an issue that people have already seen that starts off with Cyclops in bondage. There he is, trying to blast that thing off his head. And that was the end for the X-Men. 93 was the end for the X-Men. It was a reprint issue. Sales were terrible. Although I should point out, I don't mean to excite any of the extreme political left that has taken control of the comic book industry when I point out that even in X-Men 93, where the sales were down in the basement, and Stan Lee and Roy Thomas had no interest in continuing the title, it was still selling about 20,000 titles a month more than the best-selling Marvel comics do today. I won't make an argument out of it. I'll just point that out and move quickly on. X-Men 93 was the end of the X-Men. Marvel just stopped doing the title. Stan Lee wasn't interested. The sales weren't there. And it was only years later that we got 94. Another Gil Kane cover. There you have the downward hands. It's Storm this time with downward hands. And there you also, you've got downward hands with Banshee as well. And you're looking up Count Nefarious Nose. So you've got all the Gil Kane signatures there. But this is not a continuation of that earlier 93 reprint volume. This is a new story with an almost entirely new team. Readers would recognize Cyclops, and maybe some of them would recognize Banshee. There is our old friend Banshee, who appears for the first time in the issues that are in the Epic Collection that we're reading this Wednesday. Here he is in this new issue, with this new team, with these three characters no one's ever seen before. So you're getting the same thing, 25 cents, but it's a totally new team, totally revamped, where the creative team was just told, well, do what you want, right? Because the old title is gone. And a big reason why the old title was gone, because of how crappy the issues are in an Epic collection like this one. Which raises another question. We talked about runs, but it also raises the question of why Marvel is doing this. And I know it's money. You know, you've got completists, you've got collectors out there, you've got people trying to buy back their childhood, all that sort of stuff. I know that is the reason. But the Epic Collection, the original thinking behind it was that it wouldn't reprint the stuff that everyone acknowledges is bad. The Epic Collection framework would allow you to hop from good run to good run and not bother with the rest. The plain and simple truth here, I understand Michael championing a workaday artist, but the plain and simple truth is the issues in this volume don't deserve to be collected. They deserve to be forgotten. They are bad X-Men issues. And so when I look at an issue like Lonely Are the Hunted, I don't understand why Marvel abandoned that original idea for the Epic Collections. But nevertheless, that is our Epic Collection for today. The only other element in Michael's video that I did not address is philosophical, where he at one point, no doubt driven to despair by the issues that he was reading for this video, started talking about how few of us leave marks behind, and how, you know, in a couple of generations your own family has forgotten you. It's pretty heavy stuff. I might point out, as a rejoinder to that digression on his part, that you could try to leave. One of the main reasons why most people don't leave a mark behind that lasts any longer than a generation is because they don't try. It's never been easier to do. It's just you have to work at it. You have to try to do it, but it is possible. but anyway, we'll give one last glimpse of this thing, of this piece of mutant wet wash, and then we'll move on from there. We are not doing the X-Men next time. Michael in his video gave a little teaser that we'll be doing Spider-Man. Okay. I think Michael mentioned that it will be the early Spider-Man, so it will be Stan Lee teaming up with Steve Ditko, who was weird and did not engage in the kind of enthusiastic collaboration that I'm talking about. Stan Lee was very open to that kind of enthusiastic collaboration. But he could do perfectly well without it. If an artist was making their pages, then he could do perfectly. He was an absolute dyed-in-the-wool professional. Ditko was a little bit strange and usually put his own spin on things. That happened in his two signature Marvel runs, the original run of Spider-Man and the original run of Doctor Strange. The original run of Doctor Strange, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, is out today in your comic shop as one of this week's new Epic collections. I was halfway tempted. I was almost near a comic shop, but I wasn't 100% sure they'd have it. And it's murderously humid, so I didn't do it. I will call and check, and if they have it, I might get that, because I do like those issues, and that is an Epic collection that I have read those issues so many times. But anyway, we will go from admittedly third-rate X-Men stories to canonical Spider-Man stories, even if they aren't great. Ross Andrew, the artist that I was ragging on in this X-Men, goes on to a long run on Spider-Man that includes some fantastic work. He is in the pantheon of Spider-Man artists. He's not good with team books. There's just no way around that. He's not. He's been sort of farmed out on almost every team book that Marvel has, including some disastrously bad issues of the Defenders. But give him Spider-Man, he managed to sing. Some of those Spider-Man issues are great, and we'll be getting to those as well, but not next week. Next week, I think we're doing Lee and Ditko. So buckle up, true believer, and we'll see you then. And again, I'll leave a link to Michael's video down below. But I don't think he was heartless enough to say this. I will say explicitly that Lonely Are the Hunted, the Epic collection, is not worth your money. It is not worth your money. So there you go. We'll wrap it up on a downer, and we'll be back next week. Thank you, BookTube.